If you love Name Explain, then please consider leaving a super thanks in the comments of this video. It's a great way to make a one-time donation to the channel and help support Name Explain. Communication is a vital part of the human experience, from conveying important information at the workplace to simply having a laugh with our friends in the pub or bar. Yet, while communication is vital to all of us, not all communication or topics of conversation actually need to be vital. Communication can be as simple as a little head nod and hello when entering a lift, a quick comment about the weather while waiting in a queue, or even a quick moan about a football score from last night when you bump into a friend on the street. This kind of communication might not seem like much, but they are vital to the human experience, and of course this is referred to as small talk. And despite being called small talk, it's a pretty big deal. While a lot of the time small talk remains just that, a small talk, it can in many cases lead to a much larger conversation. If you were to compare a meal to a conversation, small talk is often the starter, a little soup or breadsticks or something, before you get into the main bulk of the conversation. Most conversations with friends and strangers start with small talk. Like if you were meeting up for a friend to book a holiday or something, it's quite rare you would just burst into their house and start planning. You normally begin with some harmless chit-chat before diving into things. And when it comes to small talk with strangers, it can often open the gateway to a larger conversation. And thanks to some successful small talk, a stranger could be a new friend or even a life partner. I'm sure many of us met our partners thanks to some small talk first, whether that be through some kind of meet cute or just by messaging them on a dating app. I didn't think this video would lead me to giving some dating advice, but pro tip, don't go straight in with, do you want to hook up? Have some small talk first. As well as helping lay the groundwork for a bigger conversation, small talk really has some other benefits too. It can help you find some degree of common interest with other people. It can help improve your listening skills, and it can even help with building confidence in social situations, which otherwise might make you feel uncomfortable. Also, small talk is about way more than just what people are saying. It's a gateway to body language, enthusiasm, or even their personality. How someone small talks can tell us a lot about that person. Yet despite the many benefits of small talk and what a vital role it plays for many of us, not everyone is the biggest fan of this phenomenon. Some people find it irritating and want to just cut to the chase and get on with the actual conversation. Other people find it flat out difficult, and the very idea of small talk could give them a huge amount of anxiety. Mental health website Very Well Mind have a whole article about small talk and how it can plague the minds of people with social anxiety disorder. They even have a handy list of good and bad topics for small talk for those struggling with it. Those who avoid small talk can range from singular people to entire nations, which brings us to the country in the title of this video. Sweden. Sweden is one of those countries which many people look at in awe from the outside, and that's understandable. Not only is it rife with natural beauty and wonderful cities, but it's the home of ABBA and IKEA. Who doesn't love Sweden, right? Yet despite the many things that Sweden enjoys, there is one thing they're not as big a fan of: small talk. If you're visiting Sweden from somewhere where small talk is a mainstay and try to have a casual conversation with a Swede about the weather or traffic, or simply ask them what's up, there's a pretty high chance they may look at you in confusion, panic, or even irritation. Sweden, on the whole, doesn't do small talk. From what I've read, many in Sweden see it as pointless, like you don't need to talk about the weather, everyone can see if it's snowing or raining or whatever. Many Swedes live by the philosophy that you only really need to talk if you have something to actually say, and not fill the world with endless chit-chat. They even refer to small talk as kallprat and dödprat, which translate to mean cold talk and dead talk, respectively. This very much fits the whole minimalist thing that Sweden likes to go for. Yet Swedes can even break their cool persona when it comes to small talk. They could even avoid eye contact or go to their phone when an American tourist with a bum bag and camera around their neck comes straddling towards them. Yet this dislike for small talk isn't only applicable for tourists. Swedes don't like small talk with other Swedes either, like a neighbor who lives next to them or something. If a Swede saw their neighbor leaving their house at the same time as them, you can bet they'll wait a moment before they leave to avoid the dreaded small talk. So instead of small talk, what do Swedes do instead? How do they fill the lulls in conversation or break the ice? Well, they have two options. They either don't talk or get straight to the point. These can both seem like really alien ideas to people who come from places where small talk is common. A silence in a social situation is often seen as awkward or rude. Many of us find useless things to say in times like this just to fill the gap. Not the Swedes, however. You have to respect them for that. Likewise, just diving into the matter at hand can seem really odd for many of us too. So what exactly put an entire nation off of endless chitter-chatter? Well, there's a few theories as to how exactly Sweden became so small talk averse. The key theory is due to the geography of Sweden. Sweden is a pretty big country, especially in relation to its population. Sweden is just over 1,700 square miles in size and has a population of around 10.5 million. Compare this to the UK, which is around 95,000 square miles in size and has a population of around 70 million. This means that Sweden is pretty sparsely populated, with there being big stretches of land in the nation housing relatively few people. It's also a pretty cold place too. In the north of the nation, there's only a few hours of sunlight in the winter months. These tough living conditions, as well as the sparsity of the population, meant that in the past, Swedes from across the nation didn't really interact with outsiders all that much. They would have just lived in their small towns and villages and would have been pretty familiar with everyone who lived close to them, so there wasn't much need for small talk, especially with strangers, as strangers were far and few between. Yet a lot has changed between this past Sweden and now. The world is a much more interconnected place, with people from other parts of the world calling different nations home for some time now. So why didn't Sweden pick up small talk from other cultures? Well, unlike a lot of other nations, Sweden doesn't have the richest history with immigration. Of course, there would always have been the odd person or two coming to the land and calling it home, but mass immigration to Sweden only really kicked off in the 1950s and 1960s. This was in the aftermath of the Second World War, where Sweden took in a large amount of refugees from nations like Finland, Italy, Greece, and even Yugoslavia. While many of these nations are big small talkers, by this point the tradition around not small talking was cemented in Sweden, so it just never really caught on. Yet things can change. Perhaps Sweden one day will start to embrace small talk more. I visited Stockholm a few years back now, and I don't remember anyone being particularly standoffish with myself when I talked to them. Plus, with easier global travel and the internet being a thing, perhaps more Swedes will start to understand and embrace the wonders of small talk more. In fact, one city in northern Sweden tried to embrace it. The city of Luleå ran a campaign encouraging neighbours to say hi to one another more, in the hopes it may raise the mood of the locals a tad more. If you're watching from Luleå, please let me know how this went. Maybe someday in the future, Swedes will be yakking away like the rest of us. But what I really need to mention is the fact that this idea that Swedes hate small talk doesn't apply to every single Swedish person. I'm sure there are many chatty Swedes out there, maybe even watching this video. Yeah, I really need to apologise now to all the Swedes watching this. I've generalised you all in this video as unsocial hermits, and I'm sure that's far from the case. If you're Swedish and watching, please let me know the realities of small talk in the nation. What also needs to be stressed is the fact that just because a Swedish person might not engage in small talk with you, or even do a simple smile and nod hello when you walk past them, it doesn't mean that they're rude or miserable or unkind or anything like that. Small talk and the body language that comes with it just isn't part of their culture, and Sweden isn't the only nation/culture that doesn't partake in small talk. Many other countries around the world aren't all that bothered with small talk either. In fact, there's this really fun analogy between people who do and people who don't like small talk, created by Dutch communications expert Frans Trompenaars. For the record, I just love that name, Frans Trompenaars. I just wish I was called Frans Trompenaars. It's just, I'm disappointed now that I'm not called that. That's sad. But anyway, he theorized that there are two kinds of cultures/people when it came to small talk: peach cultures and coconut cultures. This doesn't relate to people's fruit preferences, but instead these fruits represent how different groups of people share information about themselves while communicating. Peach cultures are made up of people who are more than happy to talk to strangers and engage in small talk, yet probably won't delve into really personal stuff with them, saving that kind of information with people they're really close to. They are compared to peaches because peaches are soft and easy to get into, but have a hard stone in their center where more private information is kept. Peach cultures include nations like the USA, Ireland, Japan, and Brazil in example. Most people from these nations are more than happy to chat and indulge in small talk, especially if you speak their language, of course. Coconut cultures are of course the opposite of this, where people don't reveal much about themselves to strangers, but once you get to know them, you find they're nice and friendly and all full of goodness. I'm sure you can understand why they're compared to coconuts too, because these groups have a hard exterior that can be difficult to crack, but once you're in there, you find out they're great on the inside. Sweden is of course a coconut culture, and other coconut cultures include other Scandinavian nations like Denmark, as well as other northern European nations like Finland and Russian, and some not so northern ones ones like France and Germany. I love these analogies, and they don't reflect entire countries all the time. Certain nations can be made of a mixture of peaches and coconuts. The USA is a great example of this. The common trope is that people more in the southern states are friendlier, while people in places like New York City tend to keep themselves to themselves, but are nice once you get to know them. It can even apply to specific people too. It must be tough being a peach amongst coconuts, and it must be exhausting being a coconut among peaches. These ideas are relative too. For example, a British person could seem like a peach to someone in France, whereas they could seem like a coconut to an American. Swedes, however, will most likely always seem like a coconut to most people, and a tough one to crack at that. But then again, do they even need small talk? Sweden seems like a nation with its head screwed on. It's one of the happiest countries on the planet, has great public transport, a brilliant work-life balance, has some of the most progressive LGBTQI+ rights in Europe, and amazing food. Maybe they're onto something with their lack of small talk. Name Explain depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explain videos, and your name at the end of the video with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/NameExplain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm NameExplainYT, and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, thank you all so much.